At our anniversary dinner, I watched my husband slip something into my wine. I didn't scream. I didn't knock the glass over. I didn't even let my hand tremble. I just smiled across the white tablecloth while the candle between us flickered against his face. Ryan looked handsome that night in the navy blazer I had bought him 2 Christmases ago, the one he said made him feel like the man he used to be. Then he lifted his glass. "To us, honey," he said, his mouth curving into a smirk I had not seen in years. "Tonight changes everything." I looked at the wine in his hand. My wine. The glass I had quietly switched when he turned to wave at the waiter. Then I smiled back and let him drink. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. That was the part that scared me most. We were sitting in a small Italian restaurant just outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place with linen napkins, dim amber lights, and older couples who still dressed for dinner. It was our 12th wedding anniversary. 12 years should have felt like something solid, something earned. Instead, I sat across from my husband feeling like I was dining with a stranger. Ryan had chosen the restaurant himself, which was unusual. For months, he had barely noticed dinner unless it came in a takeout bag. He worked late. He kept his phone face down. He took calls in the garage and said they were business issues. I wanted to believe him. That is the dangerous thing about loving someone. You do not stop trusting them all at once. You make excuses. You wait for the man you married to come back. That evening, I wore the emerald dress Ryan once said made my eyes look brighter. He noticed it only after the hostess complimented me. "You look nice," he said, almost like he remembered he was supposed to. "Thank you," I answered. We ordered wine. Red for both of us. Ryan talked too much, which was not like him. He asked about my design clients, Sophie's school project, the new curtains I had chosen for the living room. Small things, safe things. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and something in his expression changed. "I need to answer this," he said. "Now?" "Just a quick text." He turned slightly away from me, shielding the phone with his shoulder. That was when I saw his other hand move. Small white tablets. 2 of them. He dropped them into my wine. For 1 second, the whole restaurant seemed to go silent. I watched the tablets sink through the red liquid and disappear. My first thought was not anger. It was Sophie. Our 10-year-old daughter home with a sitter, probably wearing her purple pajamas and reading under the covers with a flashlight. I looked at Ryan's face, calm, careful, almost pleased. And somehow I became calm too. When the waiter came to refill our water, Ryan turned toward him with that charming smile he used on strangers. I reached across the table as if adjusting the small vase of roses between us. Then I switched our glasses. It was not dramatic. It did not look like revenge. It looked like a wife straightening a centerpiece. Ryan never noticed. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and reached for the glass now sitting in front of him. "To us," he said. I raised mine. "To us." He drank first. I touched my lips to the rim but swallowed nothing. Minutes passed. Ryan kept talking. He laughed at his own story about a difficult client. He ordered dessert tiramisu with 2 spoons like we were still the couple who used to share everything. I waited for him to slur his words. He didn't. I waited for his hand to shake. It didn't. A cold thought crept through me. Had I switched the wrong glass? Had I imagined what I saw? Then Ryan's phone buzzed again. This time he looked down and went still. All the color drained from his face. "Excuse me," he said, pushing back his chair too quickly. "Ryan, I'll be right back." He walked toward the restrooms, one hand gripping the edge of a chair as he passed. I watched him disappear down the narrow hallway near the kitchen. 30 seconds later, something crashed. A woman at the next table turned. A waiter hurried toward the hallway. Then someone shouted, "Call 911." I stood up slowly, my legs weak beneath me. My purse slipped from my chair, spilling lipstick, keys, and Sophie's little hair clip onto the floor. By the time I reached the hallway, Ryan was on the tile, breathing hard, his eyes half open but unfocused. The waiter knelt beside him. Someone asked if he had a medical condition. I looked at my husband, the man I had loved, the man who had put something in my drink. "I don't know," I said, and my voice sounded far away. "I don't know what happened." The paramedics arrived within minutes. They lifted him onto a stretcher, asked me what he had eaten, what he had taken, whether he was on medication. I answered what I could. Then, as they wheeled him past me, Ryan's phone slipped from his jacket pocket and landed face up on the floor. The screen lit up. One message. "Did she drink it?" The message stayed on the screen for only a few seconds. But that was all it took. Did she drink it? Not "How is Ryan?" Not "What happened?" Not "Call me." Just 4 words that confirmed my worst fear. Someone knew exactly what had been supposed to happen that night, and they expected me to be the one lying on that stretcher. I stared at the phone until one of the paramedics picked it up and handed it to me. "His belongings," he said. I nodded. My hands felt numb. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights, paperwork, and questions I couldn't answer. By midnight, Ryan was stable. The doctors told me they believed he had ingested a powerful sedative, not enough to kill him, but enough to impair judgment, coordination, and awareness. The attending physician looked puzzled. "Do you know where he got it?" "No," I said truthfully. "Has he ever taken anything like this before?" "Number." The doctor sighed. "Well, somebody needs to figure it out." I sat alone in the waiting room after he left. The vending machines hummed softly. A television mounted in the corner played a late-night news broadcast. Nobody was watching. For the first time all evening, I let myself cry. Not loudly, just quietly. The kind of crying that comes when your entire understanding of your life begins to crack, because the truth was becoming impossible to avoid. Ryan had put something in my wine. I knew what I had seen, and now there was a text message asking whether I had drunk it. The only question left was why. At 2 a.m, I called my best friend. Megan answered on the second ring. "Emily?" The concern in her voice nearly broke me. "Megan," I whispered. "What happened?" "I think Ryan tried to drug me." Silence. Not disbelief, not confusion. Silence. Then, "Tell me everything." By the time I finished, nearly 40 minutes had passed. Megan listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped talking, she said something I will never forget. "I believe you." 4 simple words. But after the night I'd had, they felt like a lifeline. The next morning, Ryan remained heavily sedated. The doctors expected a full recovery. The police had briefly questioned me, but because there was no evidence of criminal intent yet, they treated it as a medical incident. An accident. A medication mix-up. Nothing more. At least for now. I went home shortly after sunrise. The house felt strangely empty. Sophie was still asleep upstairs. Her overnight sitter had no idea anything unusual had happened. I stood in the kitchen looking at family photos. Beach vacations, Christmas mornings, school recitals, 12 years of memories. Every picture showed a smiling family. Every picture now felt like a question. After making coffee, I opened Ryan's home office. For years, I had respected his privacy. That morning, I stopped. If my husband had tried to drug me, I no longer owed him blind trust. I began carefully. Desk drawers, file cabinets, shelves, nothing obvious. Just normal paperwork, insurance statements, tax returns, mortgage documents. Then I opened a locked drawer. Ryan rarely locked anything. Fortunately, I knew exactly where he kept the key. Inside, I found 3 folders. The first contained investment records. At first glance, they seemed ordinary. Then I noticed the numbers. Large withdrawals, large losses, repeatedly. My stomach tightened. I sat down and kept reading. Over the next hour, a terrifying picture emerged. Ryan wasn't doing well financially. He was drowning. Investment after investment had failed. Retirement accounts had been tapped. Loans had been taken. Credit lines extended. Some losses stretched back years. How had I not known? Then I remembered all the times I asked. "Everything okay?" "Just business stuff." "How's work?" "Nothing to worry about." I believed him every time. The second folder was worse. Bank statements. Accounts I had never seen before. Transfers. Wire payments. Large sums moving from place to place. Some were recent. Very recent. Just weeks old. I grabbed my phone and started photographing everything. Every page. Every transaction. Every signature. Megan's voice echoed in my head. "Document everything." So I did. By noon, I had nearly 200 photos. Then I opened the third folder. At first, I thought it was legal paperwork, but the name on the documents made my blood run cold. Denise Harper. The same name that appeared repeatedly in Ryan's phone records. The same name attached to several recent appointments. My first thought was exactly what most wives would think. An affair. Of course. That had to be it. The secret calls. The lies. The distance. The text message. It all fit. Or so I thought. Then I reached the final page and realized I was looking at something much worse than infidelity. At the bottom sat a draft legal document. Unsigned. Incomplete. But clear enough. The title read, "Petition Concerning Mental Competency." My name appeared throughout the file. Emily Carter. My hands started shaking. I turned the page. Attached behind it were photographs, screenshots, notes, observations, records. Not about Ryan. About me. Someone had been building a case designed to prove that I was unstable, and whoever created it had spent months preparing. The first thing I felt wasn't fear, it was disbelief. I sat alone in Ryan's office staring at pages that described me as if I were a stranger. Prone to emotional instability. Displays irrational behavior under stress. Experiences mood fluctuations. I actually laughed. A short, bitter laugh. One of the examples attached to the file was a video of me crying after my father died 2 years earlier. Another showed me frustrated while trying to assemble a desk for Sophie's bedroom. A third was taken after I had been awake nearly 30 hours caring for Sophie through a severe flu. Normal moments. Human moments. Moments any husband should have protected. Instead, Ryan had cataloged them, labeled them, saved them, like evidence. I felt sick. For a long time, I simply sat there. Then I picked up my phone and called Megan. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. She slowly turned pages. The deeper she got, the angrier she became. "This is insane." I nodded. "He spent months doing this." "More than months." She tapped the dates. "Emily, some of these are almost a year old." That hit me harder than anything. Not the lies, not the debt, not even the drugging. The planning. The realization that while I thought we were repairing our marriage, Ryan had been quietly building a case against me. For nearly a year. Megan closed the folder. "You need a lawyer." "I know." "You need one today." "I know." But before calling a lawyer, there was something I needed to understand. Why? I still didn't understand why. The debt explained pressure. The secret accounts explained desperation. But why create a false mental health case? Why drug me? Why go this far? I spent the afternoon digging through every file I'd photographed. The answer finally appeared around 3 o'clock, hidden among legal notes and financial records. A memo, prepared by Denise Harper. I read it 3 times, then a 4th, each time hoping I had misunderstood. I hadn't. The strategy was horrifyingly simple. If Ryan could convince a court that I was emotionally unstable, he could gain leverage in a divorce. If he could portray himself as the responsible parent, he would have a stronger position regarding custody. If he could frame me as unreliable, he might even shield some of his financial misconduct from scrutiny. The sedative suddenly made perfect sense. A public incident. Witnesses. Confusion. Embarrassing behavior. A recorded breakdown. Exactly the kind of evidence they wanted. I felt cold. Not because the plan was brilliant. Because it was cruel. Around 5 o'clock, I heard the front door open. Soph. I quickly gathered the documents. My daughter dropped her backpack near the stairs and ran into the kitchen. 10 years old. Brown eyes. Messy ponytail. The best thing Ryan and I had ever created together. "Mom!" She wrapped her arms around me. I hugged her tightly. Maybe a little too tightly. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Of course." But Sophie looked unconvinced. Children notice more than adults realize, especially when something is wrong. That evening after dinner, she sat at the counter doing homework while I pretended to answer emails. Neither of us said much. Finally, she spoke. "Is Dad okay?" "He's getting better." "Good." A pause. Then, "Mom..." "Yeah." Her eyes stayed on her notebook. I heard something. My heart immediately sped up. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then looked up. "A few weeks ago." I set down my phone. "What did you hear?" She swallowed. Dad was talking on the phone. Every muscle in my body tightened. I wasn't trying to listen. "It's okay." He didn't know I was upstairs. I waited. He said once everybody saw how unstable you were, things would get easier. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Not because I doubted her. Because it matched exactly what I had found. "Are you sure?" She nodded. I remember because it made me mad. What else did he say? Her eyes filled with tears. The sight nearly broke me. He said after everything was finished, we'd probably move. "Move." She nodded again. Then came the sentence that shattered my heart. He said I'd mostly be living with him. The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls closer. My daughter had been carrying this fear alone. For weeks, maybe months. I moved beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She leaned against me immediately. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." "You're not crazy." The tears I had been holding back finally came. I turned away so she wouldn't see all of them. But some escaped anyway. "No, honey." She squeezed my hand. "I know." We sat there quietly for a long time. Eventually, Sophie went upstairs to shower. I remained at the kitchen table, staring into space, thinking about Ryan, thinking about our wedding, our first apartment, The nights we ate ramen because we couldn't afford anything else. The day Sophie was born. The way he cried when he first held her. Where had that man gone? Or had he never really existed? Just after 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A notification from the investigator my attorney had recommended earlier that afternoon. The message was brief, but it changed everything. I found something unusual regarding your daughter's financial records. We need to talk immediately. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie's face. You're not crazy, Mom. No child should ever have to say those words, especially not to her own mother. At 7 the next morning, I sat inside my attorney's office with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Across from me sat Angela Morris, 53, sharp-minded, no nonsense. The kind of attorney who didn't waste words. The private investigator had joined us by video call. His name was Mark Reynolds, and judging by the expression on his face, he had found something serious. Mrs. Carter, he said, sliding a document toward the camera, I think your husband made a very large mistake. I looked at the paperwork. The account holder's name immediately caught my attention. Sophie Carter. My stomach dropped. What is this? A brokerage account. I stared at him. Sophie is 10. Exactly. Angela leaned forward. Who opened it? Mark sighed. Your husband. The room went silent. Over the next 20 minutes, Mark explained what he had discovered. Months earlier, Ryan had opened financial accounts using Sophie's identity. Large sums of money had passed through them. Some of the transfers matched the missing funds we had already found. Others were completely new. The purpose was obvious. Ryan had been moving assets into places I wouldn't think to look. Places hidden behind our daughter's name. I felt physically ill. Not because of the money. Because he had involved Sophie. Children should never become weapons in adult conflicts. Yet Ryan had done exactly that. Angela closed the file. This changes things. How much? A lot. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Even I understood how bad this looked. When the meeting ended, Angela gave me one piece of advice. Do not confront him. I almost laughed. I wasn't planning to. Good. She folded her hands. People become careless when they believe they're winning. That sentence stayed with me all day. People become careless when they believe they're winning. Ryan still thought his plan was intact. He didn't know I had seen the files. He didn't know about the investigation. He didn't know Sophie had overheard him. Most importantly, he didn't know I was finally paying attention. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the role of supportive wife. I visited him in the hospital. I asked how he was feeling. I brought him clean clothes. I listened to doctors explain recovery timelines. Ryan acted grateful, warm, almost affectionate. Watching him perform was unsettling. The man who had secretly built a case against me now held my hand and thanked me for standing by him. Sometimes I wondered whether he believed his own lies. Other times I wondered whether I had ever really known him. One afternoon, while sitting beside his hospital bed, Ryan squeezed my hand. I don't know what I'd do without you. For a moment, I simply stared at him. 12 years. 12 years together. And I couldn't tell whether that sentence came from love or manipulation. Maybe he couldn't either. After Ryan returned home, I became even more careful. No accusations, no confrontations, no emotional scenes, nothing. I smiled, cooked dinner, helped Sophie with homework, discussed school projects, acted exactly as I always had. Meanwhile, Angela and Mark continued digging. The deeper they looked, the uglier the picture became. By the 3rd week, they had reconstructed much of Ryan's financial situation. The losses were staggering. Failed investments, bad loans, risky speculation. Nearly $1.8 million gone. The pressure must have been enormous. For the first time, I actually felt a brief flash of sympathy. Not for what he had done, for the fear that had probably driven him there. Then I remembered the pills, the videos, Sophie's tears, and the sympathy vanished. One evening, Mark called with an update. I've been following Ryan. I took a deep breath. Is there another woman? A pause. Then, no. That answer surprised me. I sat upright. What? I haven't found evidence of an affair. None. None. That made no sense. The late-night calls, the meetings, the secrecy, all of it pointed toward infidelity. Unless, I suddenly thought of Denise. Who is he meeting? Mark glanced at his notes. The attorney. I frowned. Only her, mostly. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Mark said something that changed my understanding of everything. I don't think Denise is a girlfriend. What do you think she is? A strategist. The word landed heavily. Not a romance. Not a midlife crisis. Not a secret love story. A plan. A calculated plan. Ryan wasn't being manipulated by another woman. Ryan was driving this himself. Every choice. Every lie. Every step. The realization hurt more than discovering an affair ever could, because affairs sometimes happen in moments of weakness. This was different. This was deliberate. That night, I sat alone on the back porch after Sophie went to bed. The summer air was warm. Crickets sang in the darkness. Inside the house, Ryan watched television as if nothing had happened, as if our marriage wasn't already lying in pieces. My phone buzzed. A new message from Mark. This one contained only a single sentence. I read it twice, then a third time. My pulse quickened. Because after weeks of searching, he had finally found something that could destroy Ryan's entire plan. Proof. Undeniable proof. Not only of hidden money, but of exactly where it had gone. The proof arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my car outside a grocery store when Mark emailed the file. For several seconds, I just stared at the notification. Then I opened it. My heart started pounding immediately. Every transfer, every account, every date, everything was connected. The missing money hadn't disappeared. Ryan had moved it, and now we could prove it. For nearly 11 months, he had quietly shifted funds through multiple accounts, including the ones opened under Sophie's name. The trail was complicated, but not complicated enough. Mark had followed it all the way through. By the time I finished reading, one thing was painfully clear. Ryan's entire strategy depended on me remaining ignorant. The second I understood what he was doing, the plan began falling apart. I forwarded everything to Angela. 10 minutes later, she called. "Emily, yeah, we got him." I closed my eyes. Not because I felt victorious, because I felt exhausted. The woman who had walked into that anniversary dinner no longer existed. She had trusted blindly. She had believed explanations. She had ignored warning signs. That version of me was gone. Over the next several weeks, Angela moved quickly. Legal protections were placed around my business. Financial records were preserved. Additional documentation was collected. Every step happened quietly. Ryan remained completely unaware. And the more confident he became, the more careless he got. One evening, he actually smiled across the dinner table. "You seem happier lately." I nearly laughed. Happier, less stressed. I looked at him, at the man who had spent months planning my destruction, the man who thought he was winning. "Maybe I'm just sleeping better." He smiled. "I like seeing you relaxed." The irony was almost unbearable. Meanwhile, Sophie was changing too. She became quieter around Ryan. Polite, respectful, but distant. Children have a remarkable ability to recognize betrayal, even when they cannot fully explain it. One Saturday afternoon, I overheard Ryan trying to reconnect. "Want to go get ice cream?" Sophie looked up from her book. "Maybe another time." Ryan's face fell. It was subtle, but I saw it. For the first time, he was beginning to experience consequences no lawyer could fix. A week later, Angela called. "It's time." The word sent a chill through me. Time. The moment we had been building toward. The moment Ryan believed would be his victory. We scheduled a meeting. Officially, it was to discuss financial disclosures and preliminary divorce matters. Unofficially, it was the day his world would collapse. The meeting took place in a conference room downtown. Ryan arrived looking confident. Too confident. Denise sat beside him reviewing documents. For the first time, I saw her in person. Professional. Controlled. Expressionless. Not a villain. Not a seductress. Just a lawyer who had chosen the wrong client. Megan sat beside me. Her presence alone made me feel stronger. Across the room, Ryan smiled. "You look good." I nodded. "Thank you." He slid a folder toward me. "I think we can keep this simple." Angela glanced at the paperwork but said nothing. Ryan continued. "If we handle this cooperatively, everybody benefits." Everybody. What an interesting choice of words. He spoke for nearly 15 minutes, about fairness, about moving forward, about minimizing conflict. Listening to him was surreal. A man who had secretly tried to drug me was now giving lectures about cooperation. Finally, he finished. Then he leaned back, confident, relaxed, victorious, exactly as Angela predicted. He thought he had won. I looked at Megan. She gave me a small nod. I turned toward Angela. "Ready." Ryan frowned slightly. "Ready for what?" Angela opened a laptop. The screen illuminated the conference room. Then she pressed play. The first file appeared. Bank records. The second. Transfer histories. The third. Account registrations connected to Sophie. The fourth. Communications. Dates. Timelines. Patterns. Evidence. Lots of evidence. Ryan's smile disappeared. Denise stopped taking notes. The room became silent. Every minute that passed made the situation worse. For Ryan. Much worse. Halfway through the presentation, he stopped pretending. "What is this?" Angela looked directly at him. "The truth." His face turned pale. Denise slowly closed her folder. For the first time all morning, she looked genuinely concerned. Ryan turned toward me. "Emily." "No." My voice remained calm, steady, almost surprisingly calm. "No more lies." The room went silent again. Then something happened that nobody expected. Sophie spoke. She had been waiting outside with her grandparents. Angela had arranged for her statement to be available if necessary. When she entered, Ryan looked stunned. His daughter stood there clutching a small notebook. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "You weren't trying to protect me." Ryan froze. "You were trying to take me away from Mom." I have never seen a human face change so quickly. For the first time since this nightmare began, Ryan looked completely defeated. And we were only getting started. The room stayed silent after Sophie spoke. Not the ordinary kind of silence. The kind that settles over people when a truth becomes impossible to escape. Ryan stared at our daughter. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For once he had nothing to say. I looked at Sophie and felt a strange mix of heartbreak and pride. She should never have been placed in this position. Yet there she stood, braver than most adults I knew. Angela gently thanked her and asked her grandparents to take her outside. As soon as the door closed behind them, Ryan sank into his chair. He suddenly looked older, not physically, emotionally, like a man watching years of carefully built lies collapse around him. Denise spoke first. "Ryan, is there anything in these documents that is inaccurate?" A simple question, a devastating one. Because everyone in the room already knew the answer. Ryan looked at the table, then at the laptop, then at me. "No." His voice barely rose above a whisper. Denise nodded once. Professional. Detached. I could almost see her evaluating the situation. Not emotionally. Legally. And the conclusion was obvious. The case was over. Not officially. But practically. She closed her folder. "I need to review everything independently." Translation. She was distancing herself. Fast. Ryan understood it too. The confidence he had carried into the room was gone. For the next hour, the conversation shifted from accusations to facts. Account numbers. Transfers. Documentation. Dates. Evidence. Cold objective reality. By the end, nobody was arguing anymore. There was nothing left to argue about. The truth had won. When the meeting finally ended, Ryan asked if he could speak with me privately. Angela looked at me. I nodded. The others quietly left the room. A few moments later, only Ryan and I remained. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. "I never wanted it to go this far." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because people always say that after they're caught. Not before. After. "You bought the pills." Silence. "You collected videos." Silence. "You opened accounts under our daughter's name." His eyes dropped. "You planned this for almost a year." Still silence. Finally, he looked up. I was drowning. There it was. Not an excuse. Not quite an apology. Just the truth. "I know." The answer surprised him. "I know about the debt, Ryan." His shoulders slumped. For a moment, he looked relieved. Almost grateful. Like a man who was tired of carrying something heavy. "I kept thinking I could fix it. By destroying me," he winced. The question landed exactly where it should. "No." "Then what?" Ryan rubbed his face. The gesture suddenly reminded me of the young man I married. The man who used to stay awake building furniture for our first apartment. The man who cried when Sophie was born. The man I thought I knew. I got scared. His voice cracked. "The deeper the debt became, the harder it was to tell you." I listened quietly. "I thought if I could get control of everything, I could solve it." Everything. Such a small word. Money. Business. Custody. Reputation. My life. Our daughter's future. Everything. I didn't wake up one morning planning this. "No," I nodded slowly. "You made that choice hundreds of times instead." That hurt him. I could see it. Because it was true. Nobody accidentally spends 11 months building a betrayal. They choose it repeatedly. One decision at a time. When we finally left the building, Ryan walked alone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for him. That realization was strangely freeing. Over the next several months, the legal process moved forward. Much of the hidden money was recovered. The accounts involving Sophie were shut down. My business remained protected. The divorce proceeded. Slowly, painfully, but fairly. Ryan fought less than anyone expected. Partly because the evidence was overwhelming. Partly because something inside him seemed to have broken that day in the conference room. Then came the moment that affected me more than any court hearing. One evening, Sophie asked if she could see her father. The request caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, I expected anger. Instead, she simply looked tired. I miss him. Children are remarkable. Their hearts often heal faster than ours. I drove her to Ryan's apartment. Nothing fancy. A modest rental on the other side of town. When he opened the door, his face immediately softened. Hey, kiddo. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She hugged him. And Ryan broke. Not dramatically. Not like in movies. He simply dropped to his knees and held his daughter while crying harder than I had ever seen. Not for losing money. Not for losing the marriage. For losing her trust. The one thing he never should have risked. Later, Sophie waited in the car while Ryan walked me back toward the parking lot. The evening air was cool. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he stopped. There was one thing I never told you. I looked at him. What? He stared into the darkness. When I started all this, I honestly believed I was protecting myself. A long pause. Now I realize I was destroying everything that actually mattered. A year later, I found myself standing in the exact same kitchen where my life had fallen apart. Only now everything felt different. The fear was gone. The uncertainty was gone. Even the anger was mostly gone. The house was filled with laughter. Pink balloons floated near the ceiling. A birthday banner stretched across the dining room wall. And Sophie, now 11 years old, was racing through the living room with 3 friends laughing so hard she could barely breathe. For a moment, I simply stood there and watched. Not the decorations. Not the cake. Her. A year earlier, I had been terrified of losing my daughter. Now I was watching her become happy again. That was worth more than any courtroom victory. My interior design business was thriving. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing flashy. Just steady growth. Good clients. Reliable employees. A life that felt stable again. Megan still teased me that I worked too much. She was probably right. But she had also been beside me through the darkest year of my life. Some friendships become family. Ours had. The doorbell rang. I glanced at the clock. Right on time. Sophie immediately looked up. Dad's here. There was excitement in her voice. Not the blind trust she once had. That would take longer. Maybe years. But there was affection. Hope. A relationship slowly healing. And that mattered. I opened the door. Ryan stood on the porch holding a small gift bag. He looked different. Not older. Lighter. The arrogance was gone. The constant tension was gone. Life had humbled him. Pain had humbled him. Hey, he said quietly. Hi, Ryan. For a brief moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. A small smile. Not the charming smile he used to use to persuade people. A real one. Is it okay if I come in? Of course. He stepped inside. Sophie's face lit up. Dad! She wrapped her arms around him. Ryan hugged her carefully, almost like he still couldn't believe he had been given another chance. Watching them together stirred something inside me. Not love. That chapter was over. Not resentment either. Surprisingly, just acceptance. The afternoon passed peacefully. Children ate cake. Presents were opened. Parents chatted. Grandparents took too many pictures. Life happened. Ordinary life. The kind of life I once feared losing forever. At one point, I stepped onto the back patio for a little quiet. The sun was beginning to set. Golden light stretched across the yard. A minute later, the sliding door opened. Ryan stepped outside. I figured I'd find you here. I smiled slightly. Old habits? He nodded. For a while, we simply stood there looking across the lawn. 2 people who had once planned to grow old together. 2 people whose lives had taken different paths. Eventually, Ryan spoke. I still think about that night. I knew exactly which night he meant. The anniversary dinner. The wine. The pills. The beginning of the end. So do I. He looked down. I almost destroyed everything. Neither of us pretended otherwise. There was no point. The truth had already done its work. I know. He nodded slowly. Then he surprised me. You know what I regret most. I waited. It isn't losing the marriage. The honesty caught me off guard. Ryan swallowed. It's realizing how much fear I brought into Sophie's life. I looked through the window. Our daughter was laughing with her friends, completely unaware we were talking about her. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that. For once I believed him. Not because he said the right words, because of everything he had done afterward. The counseling, the consistency, the effort. Trust wasn't fully restored, but he was trying, every day. And sometimes trying matters. The house erupted with another burst of laughter. Sophie's voice carried through the screen door. "Dad, Mom, come see this." Ryan smiled. "Sounds like we're needed." I laughed softly. "Looks that way." As we walked back toward the house, Ryan paused. "Thank you." I turned. "For what?" "For not teaching her to hate me." The words hung between us. Then I answered honestly. "I almost did." His expression tightened. "I know. But she deserved better." A moment later we walked inside together. Not as husband and wife, not even as friends, but as two parents who had finally learned what mattered most. That night, after everyone left and the house grew quiet, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The same table where I once discovered evidence that my marriage was built on lies. Now it held wrapping paper crumbs and the remains of birthday cake. And somehow that felt perfect. Because revenge hadn't been watching Ryan suffer. It hadn't been winning in court. It hadn't been exposing his lies. Real victory was waking up one morning and realizing his betrayal no longer controlled my life. If there's one lesson I carried from all of this, it's that love should never require blindness. Trust is important, but so is paying attention. So is protecting yourself. And sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is refuse to become bitter after being hurt. If this story reminded you of someone you've known or perhaps even something you've lived through, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on it. And if you'd like to hear more stories about resilience, family forgiveness, and finding strength when life takes an unexpected turn, I'd be honored if you shared your thoughts and joined me again. Thank you for listening.